They called him Gaius, a boy who inherited the world, but not the soul to bear it. He stood upon the summit, convinced the gods had simply forgotten their crown. Before the madness, there was adoration. The Citian's breath held for its new Caesar. Power is a mirror. At first, you see a leader, then only a god. The illness, they said, began as a tremor in the heart, a fever of the divine. He sought not to rule Rome, but to become the sun that burned it.
He challenged the sky. He claimed Jupiter's thunder was merely an echo of his own voice.
In Rome, loyalty was merely the space between a man's last thought and his final breath. The emperor saw not men, but masks, and he longed to strip them bare. His trust was placed in the steel edge of a blade, never the word of a friend. Fear was the mortar of his empire. It held the stones together. He sought to meet the god inside, but he only found a stranger. The feasts were not for pleasure, but for display, a stage for his divine theatrics. The inner chambers were his new temple, the rites his own invention. His plays were tragedies. His audience, the victims he chose. Practiced his divinity. A god does not apologize. A god only acts. But the deepest horror was always personal. Locked away from the sun. The bread of suffering is the only offering he truly accepted. Was the actor and the playwright rehearsing the violence to come?
His sister, Drusilla. His great, terrible desire.
Every handshake was a lie. Every glance, a plea for survival. No man was safe, especially not the ones he claimed to love. He gave his horse a consulate, a final, cold joke against the...
They cried for the republic they remembered, and the god they had been given.
The reflection was always changing. From brilliant flame to dark, swirling chaos. Rome held its breath, waiting for the fever to break, or the world to end.
He marched not for conquest, but for the performance. A fake war against a harmless sea.
The sea was his rival. He demanded tribute from the waves themselves. The army's spirit was broken. They were men forced to act out a god's childish dream. The divine madness was at its peak. The lines between play and decree were gone. He ordered his image to be placed in every temple. A god must be seen. Every mistake was a death sentence. Every tremor of the hand, a crime. The foundations of Rome, like the emperor's mind, were beginning to crack. But the most loyal dogs eventually grow hungry for the master's throat. Cassius Chaerea was the quietest man in the guard, the one who felt the deepest shame.
He sought not glory, but release. A final, silent prayer for the city.
The Emperor, in his hubris, had ceased to see the daggers around him. The light of his life was about to be snuffed out by a sudden, chilling gust. A whisper of suspicion. A moment of clarity that came too late. Too late. The shadows of Rome were preparing to move against the one who ruled the light. The last day was a performance. A final, gaudy display of his power. The moment arrived not in a battle, but in a mundane corridor, just a few steps from salvation. One blow for the humiliation, the rest for Rome. The silence of the act was broken by 1,000 screams. Had bled. The crown had fallen.
The beast was slain, but its violence was infectious. The killing had just begun.
The color of divinity was now stained, cheapened, lost. The night passed, and Rome awoke to a terrifying, glorious silence. Who would rule? The fear of the tyrant was replaced by the fear of the void.
True gods remained, watching the foolish play of men below. He left behind not a legacy of law, but a memory of madness. A warning.
The soul of Caligula was a scar on the soul of the empire, a wound that never truly healed.
Remember Gaius. Remember the boy who dreamed he was a god, and the nightmare that followed. The power of Rome survived the man. The halls, once filled with laughter and decree, became tunnels of pure dread. Every light was a fragile deception. The darkness was eternal and vast.
Even in moments of rest, the emperor was a creature of isolated scrutiny.
His life rested on the hand of a slave, a momentary, terrifying trust. He held the emperor's life, and in that knowledge, his own death. Even the animals sensed the unnatural climate, the prison of the court. He hired barbarians to protect him from his own citizens. A final, bitter irony.
Haltet die Linie!
Freedom was a visible thing, yet utterly untouchable. They spoke not to discuss, but to gauge. Who was safe? Who was next?
Silence was the only true sanctuary. To speak was to invite the thunder.
The only thing stronger than fear was the desperate, fragile bond of family.
Gods offered moments of awful clarity before plunging the world back into shadow.
He wrote the decrees of a madman, a living testament to the day's insanity. The currency of the empire had become cheap, tossed aside like dirt.
His mind was a labyrinth of rituals, tiny prisons he built for himself.
Even the stone weeps for the lost dignity of Rome. The veneer of civilization was thin. Beneath it, the wild, brutal nature of man. His jokes were the darkest of all, and the audience paid a terrible price. The beautiful order was disrupted, a hole in the tapestry of history. He was the architect of humiliation, chipping away at the dignity of the elite. Dignity was a luxury Rome could no longer afford.
He could not stand the reverence for the old gods. He had to replace them.
His painted gaze demanded worship. A terror that crossed into art.
Power was absolute and absolutely corrosive.
Those who had his favor had a greater distance to fall. Quiet work of vengeance, preparing the tools of the final reckoning. He saw his duty clearly, the end of the man, for the salvation of the title.
He was not immune to fear, only subservient to a greater imperative.
Final display. He would be remembered, whether as God or devil.
His plans were vast, impulsive, and disconnected from reality.
He would conquer the sea. His temper was the air they breathed, toxic and unpredictable. To survive was to be a ghost, a presence that did not move or breathe. The tool of release was ready, waiting for its curtain call. The audience for the final tragedy was assembled. God was descending to his stage. He did not see the pit waiting. The assassin was watching the rhythm, the heartbeat of the target. A moment of humanity, quickly swallowed by the surrounding darkness. A final, fleeting sense of dread. The animal's intuition.
The moment of isolation. The perfect, fatal seam in his protection.
No grand declaration. Just the cold, swift end of an argument. The absolute end of self-deception. The truth of mortality, delivered by steel. The blood was the signal. The battle for Rome's soul had begun again. The ring fell. The divine connection severed. He moved without thought, only impulse. The act was complete. Rome waited. The palace had eaten its master, and now it digested the violence. The vultures gathered. The question was not to take the power, but how? Fear was a reflex. Even death could not entirely erase the awe. The night belonged to the conspirators and the ghosts they had raised. The humble lights of Rome burned brighter. A small, defiant spark of life. The tool of his terror. Broken by the final, necessary act. The tomb of the Caesars. The power was cyclical. The darkness always returned. Tragedy of the man, separated from the myth. A boy who simply lost his way. The hands of the assassin, forever stained by the blood of the princeps. The sun rises, heedless of the night's horrors. The world moves on. Rome endures. The city devours its children, but the mother is eternal.